tired of having to look up the directions for the Kitchener stitch every single time you go to do it? Or tired of having to watch a video? I'm going to show you how to memorize Kitchener stitch with just 4 words and 1 trick. Hi, my name is Jennifer, otherwise known as Alindria on Ravelry or Alindria Knits on Instagram. And today I'm going to share with you how I taught myself to memorize Kitchener stitch back when I started knitting socks around 11 years ago. Not only am I going to tell you the 4 words and 1 trick that I used to memorize Kitchener, but I will also explain the 3 layers of knowledge about Kitchener stitch that you need to know, and I'll give you a little tip at the end as well. So, if you've done Kitchener stitch maybe a couple times before, perhaps all you need is the 4 words and 1 trick. And you can stop watching my video there. However, if you want a more complete explanation of what is going on with the Kitchener stitch, go ahead and keep watching. And I will explain why you only need these 4 words and 1 trick, plus what the other layers of knowledge are. So let's get into it. What are these layers of knowledge that I'm talking about? Well, this is just something that I made up when I was thinking about making this video and how to explain it. There are 3 different parts that you need to know for the Kitchener stitch. There is one, or what I call the first layer of knowledge, is what you actively have to remember. That is the 4 words and 1 trick. So before we get started, I want you to pause this video if you need to and grab a tapestry needle. And if you also have a sock project in the works, go ahead and grab that too. It doesn't need to be ready for the toe. We're just going to hold it. So the trick that we're going to use is we're going to use our kinesthetic memory, what you might also know as muscle memory. Because so when we say the 4 words, we're using our auditory memory. And when we move our hand, we're using our kinesthetic memory. And the more types of memory that you activate at once, the easier it is to remember something. So go ahead and pause right now and come back. Okay, do you have your tapestry needle? So take your tapestry needle in your hand and you're going to move it to the front and you're going to say knit purl. And then you're going to move it to the back and say purl knit. That's it. Knit purl, purl knit. Knit purl, purl knit. Say it with me. Knit purl, purl knit. Those are the 4 words and the 1 trick that you need to remember Kitchener stitch. Now, if that's all you need from me today, go ahead and shut off this video. But if you want a greater explanation of what is going on in Kitchener stitch, and if you want to learn how to do it, keep watching, and then I will show you how to do the Kitchener stitch on this sock at the end. Okay, so what is happening during Kitchener stitch? Sometimes when we have trouble remembering something, it's because either what we're trying to memorize is too long, which is why I have simplified it down to 4 words, or we don't understand what is going on with it. So, this is what's happening. So on the front needle, we move our hand to the front, we say knit purl. That is the direction we insert this tapestry needle into the stitches. We insert it knitwise into the first stitch and purlwise into the second stitch. And then we move our hand to the back, which signifies on the back needle, purl knit, we insert the tapestry needle purlwise on the first stitch and then knitwise onto the second stitch. Okay, you still with me? All right, so that's what's happening with what I call the first layer of knowledge. That first layer of knowledge is what you actively have to remember. Knit purl, purl knit. Knit purl, purl knit. Now, let's move on to the second layer of knowledge. What else is happening when we do Kitchener stitch? Well, we're working 2 stitches on the front needle, followed by 2 stitches on the back needle. And we know some of these stitches are going to be coming off the needle because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to close up all the stitches. So which stitch is coming off the needle? Well, think about it for a second. The first stitch is coming off the needle. That makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you're not going to take the second stitch off the needle and leave the first one on. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense for, closing up this toe. And you're not taking both stitches off the needle. So now you know that it's always the first stitch of the combo that's coming off. Knit, purl. Which stitch is coming off the needle first? That first stitch, the one that you go into knitwise. And then we go to the back. Purl, knit. Which stitch of those is coming off the needle? The purl is, because the purl is the first one. So you go into that back stitch purlwise, and that is the one that's coming off the needle. Now that is something you do not need to actively remember. Now you're going to know this forever. It's always the first stitch that comes off the needle. You don't need to think about it. You do not need to think about it. Trust yourself to remember that. Okay? Have the confidence that you will remember that it's always the first stitch of the combo coming off the needle. Now, that was the second layer of knowledge. What is the third and final layer of knowledge that you need to know about Kitchener stitch? You need to know about the setup stitch. Now, whether or not you use the setup stitch on the toe of a sock is up to you. However, you still need to know about it because there are other situations where you would need to use the setup stitch. So we're going to learn that. The setup stitch is always the second stitch of the combo. So what is the second stitch? On the front needle, knit, purl. The purl is the second stitch, okay? And on the back needle, purl, knit. The knit is the second stitch. So when you're starting with the second stitch, does it come off the needle? No, it does not, because only the first stitch of the combo comes off the needle. So when you're doing the setup stitch on a sock, you go in purlwise and it stays on the needle. And then on the back, you go in knitwise and it stays on the needle because that is the second stitch of the... Okay. What other situations do you need to know this setup stitch? If you are ever doing Kitchener stitch in the round, such as you're closing up a cowl, you will need to do the setup stitch. Another example would be, say you have a sweater and you decide you want to make it longer. So you cut off the bottom ribbing, you knit a little bit of extra length, and then you put all of that back on the needles and you attach the ribbing again using Kitchener stitch in the round. You need to use that setup stitch because when you're doing Kitchener stitch, the yarn tail will pass through every stitch twice, including at the beginning and the end. So you will be starting with the second stitch, and if you're doing it in the round, you come back around, you end with the first stitch, so that each stitch in the entire round gets worked twice. Now, I do the setup stitch on my sock because that's how I learned and I like it. I like having the first and last stitch work twice. You don't have to do that if that's your preference. Some people do it to avoid the ears, but let me show you something. This is a sock that I've done. I did the setup stitch. There's no ears. There are a tiny bit of corners, but once you wear this sock, those corners will disappear and it'll be nice and round in there. So I will show you that setup stitch because it's good to know. However, this is also not something you actively have to remember all the time. You know the setup stitch starts with the second stitch in the sequence. Knit, purl, it starts purlwise. And on the back, purl, knit, it starts knitwise. So let's do our practice a little bit here again. Bring your hand to the front and say knit, purl. Bring your hand to the back and say purl, knit. Knit, purl, knit, knit, purl, knit. Now I'm actually going to show you the Kitchener stitch, and I will do my little explanations along the way. So we start with the setup stitch. That's the second stitch in each combo. So the front, knit, purl, we start by going purlwise and pull it through. And on the back, purl, knit. What's the second one? Knit. So we put the needle in knitwise and pull it through. There. That's the setup. Easy, right? So now we're going to start with knit, purl, knit, knit, purl, knit. So, knit, purl, knit. Okay, come to the front again, knit, purl, knit, purl. Go to the back, purl, knit. Okay. Now, here's a little tip. If you can see, I'm only pulling my yarn through once. So I do both motions on the front. Knit, purl, I pull it through. Then I go to the back. Purl, knit, and pull it through. You can also, as long as you do the both motions together, you work both stitches on the front and then you work both stitches on the back. You can put your knitting down and you can come back later and you won't get confused about where you are. Because if your yarn is hanging off the back needle like it is here, you know you just worked the back stitches. And so you'll come again and you will work the front stitches. Knit, purl. Similarly, if you put your knitting down like this and you pick it up and your yarn is hanging off the front needle, you'll know that you're ready to do the back. Purl, knit. And just make sure that yarn goes under the needle and not over the needles as you're doing this. Knit, purl, knit, knit, purl, knit, knit, purl, knit. Now, we're at the end. We have one stitch left on each needle. You're only going to be working the first stitch of the combo. So on the front needle, what is the first stitch? It's knit, knit, purl. So we go in knitwise. And on the back needle, what's the first stitch of that combo? It's purl, knit. So we go in purlwise. And we are done. Now, you will see there is that tiny little ear, but to take care of that, all I do is I stick my hand inside, and right where that ear is, I pull it down, and right where I pull it down, that's where I stick my needle in, and pull it through on the inside, and I pull it tight. So I'm tacking that ear down. And then, as you can see, I will just weave in the end on the inside. That ear is tacked down, and there's no ears. Like I said, there are little corners, but once you wear the socks, they'll disappear. So it's not a big deal. And again, you do not have to do the setup stitch at the beginning and do that last stitch at the end if you don't want to. Like I said, it's personal preference. But if you do, it'll look just like this, and you're good to go. So I hope that was helpful and that you have more success with memorizing Kitchener stitch now. If you already know Kitchener stitch and you learned a different way, that is great. I'm not saying this way is better, I'm just saying it's a different way. I just think it's a little easier because there's fewer words you have to memorize, and then the other things, those other two, what I call layers of knowledge, you don't have to think about all the time, right? You just understand them, and you recall that information when and if you need to. All right, thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.